The police cells are not a gazetted detention facility, but a transition facility. Earlier, the prosecution had sought the extension of the detention of 4 suspects in police custody because the investigations were incomplete. But the chief magistrate overruled the prosecution request and directed that all suspects be detained at Ruzira prison. He also ruled that suspects be allowed to meet their relatives at the court premise and also be allowed to access medical services. The suspects will return to court on the 22nd of this month for mention.
Since the July 7th twin bombings in Kampala, several citizens have been arrested within and outside the country. The Kenya government appears to have steadily and with little regard to due process handed over several Kenyans to foreign authorities. The police force is at the center of the whole fiasco, with specialized police units such as the Anti-Terrorism Police Unit literally kidnapping Kenyans and taking them across the border. While they claim to have followed extradition procedures in some of the cases, there is no evidence this is the case. Extradition requires the issuing of an arrest warrant in Kenya and a court order granting permission for the removals. At least 12 Kenyans have apparently been handed over to Uganda illegally. They include Idris Magondu, Hussein Hassan Agade, Mohammed Abdo, Muhammad Hamid, Habib Suleiman Joroge, Yahya Mbuthia Suleiman, Omar Awad Omar, and Ismail Abubakar. The Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims alleges that Kenyan authorities are doing this at the behest of American Federal Bureau of Investigation officials deployed to help investigations in Kampala. In addition to those renditioned, there are 5 Kenyans who were arrested in Uganda, among them controversial rights activist Alamein Kimathi. There are concerns this group is unlikely to face justice, with the Ugandan government even arresting lawyers who go to the country to represent suspects. On the 15th of September, Kenyan lawyer Mbugua Moreithi was arrested and held for several days alongside Kimathi as he sought to represent Kenyan terrorism suspects.
At this juncture, worry was now spreading among Kenyan youth known to be involved in human rights activism. A case was filed in court by one of the youths to stop any possible kidnap and rendition to Uganda without follow of due law process.
The High Court has stopped the arrest of a businessman wanted by Uganda police over the Kampala bombings last July, which left over 70 people dead. Justice Mohamed Wasame stopped the arrest of Mohamed Akhtar Kana on the grounds that it was unconstitutional. The businessman had asked the court to restrain Kenyan authorities from arresting and surrendering him to Ugandan authorities. And in his ruling, Justice Wasame accused the government of simplifying and trivializing the matter by saying that there is an agreement to transfer suspects within East Africa at the request of a member state. The Kenyan businessman had gone to court under a certificate of urgency, saying there were threats to his rights to freedom as stipulated under the Bill of Rights. A total of 32 people have so far been charged in Uganda for carrying out the July 11 suicide attacks on 2 bar restaurants in Kampala, which were crowded with people watching the Football World Cup final on television. 10 of those charged are Kenyans, despite protests from human rights and Muslim groups concerned over their safety.
The judge went further and ruled that after studying the case, the renditioning of the Muslims to Uganda was illegal and contravenes the constitution. A similar ruling was mirrored by yet another judge, Justice Aggrey Muchelule,
observed that Mohammed Hamid Suleiman was a Kenyan citizen who enjoyed immunity against expulsion. The judge said that not even a state of war or terrorism will justify the actions by the Attorney General and the police to arrest and expeditiously hand over the Kenyan suspect to Ugandan authorities, given that authorities in Kampala had neither requested to have the suspect handed over to them nor issued a warrant of his arrest. While acknowledging that terrorism poses a challenge to law enforcement agencies worldwide, the judge noted that many countries do not want to try terrorism suspects for fear of reprisals. This, he said, may have informed the anti-terrorism police unit's haste in handing over the suspects to Ugandan authorities. Suleiman was arrested by officers attached to the anti-terrorism police unit on August 13th this year and was in Uganda by the following day. His wife Zuhura Suleiman filed the case that sought his production in court on August 16th. The state argues that it is impossible to return Suleiman to Kenya since, according to them, the suspect was beyond the jurisdiction of the Kenyan courts. Earlier in the week, High Court Judge Mohamed Warsame stopped the arrest and extradition of a businessman Mohamed Akhtar Kana over the Kampala bombings in which 70 people were killed, but not before taking President Kibaki to task over whether or not he was protecting, preserving and safeguarding the interests and basic rights of all Kenyans as enshrined in the new constitution.
And soon enough, the Minister of Justice, Honorable Mutula Kilonzo, equally reiterated the same.
Mutula was however quick to shift the blame to Attorney General Amos Wako.
I forwarded that request to the Attorney General so that he can then be able to tell the country why Kenyans have been treated in this manner and what steps will be taken.
Mutula says that Police Commissioner Matthew Tere risks facing prosecution for violating the rights of the accused.
Mtu wa Kenya kumpeleka Uganda wala Tanzania wala Ethiopia wala wapi is a violation of Kenya's constitution.
Mutula's sentiments come just 4 days after the High Court criticized the government and the police for taking Kenyans to face trial over the Kampala July bombings without following the laid-down procedures. On Monday, the court ruled that terrorism cannot be used as a reason to prosecute Kenyans in Uganda. The LSK branch in Mombasa now wants Internal Security Minister George Saitoti to resign following the renditions.
Minister of Internal Affairs, of Internal Security, who we believe must have known, or his officers must be responsible for these unlawful and unconstitutional acts. There must be ministerial responsibility taken, and we call upon the minister to step down.
The LSK chair in Mombasa, Mohamed Balala, says everyone involved in the rendition of Kenyans should be answerable.
We call for action to be taken against members of the executive who have participated in any unlawful or unconstitutional acts of renditions.
30th November 2010 was a happy day to some of the victims and their families, as a group was surprisingly released on grounds that the prosecutor cited were lack of interest in their case.
Njoroge had earlier been charged with being an accomplice, but now all 89 charges relating to the bombings, including terrorism, murder and attempted murder, were preferred against him. The 18 suspects were set free after the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, lost interest in their case. However, shortly after they left the courtroom, and while the others were either being released or taken back to the prison bus, Issa Ali Senkumba, Christopher Banturaine and Abdullahi Muhammad were rearrested and taken in a separate car. By the time they were rearrested, defense lawyer Ladislas Rakafuzi had already gone, but two of his colleagues were present. Abdullahi Muhammad is said to have been arrested in matters related to immigration, while Christopher Banturaine's lawyer said he was taken in again for obtaining goods by false pretense, a separate charge in an earlier file. The three suspects pending arrest are Muhammad Ali, Jabir Mahmoud Ali and Nyamadondo Suleiman Hijar. Nakawa Chief Magistrate Deo Sejemba said if these three were arrested, their case would be mentioned on the 31st of January.
Their release demystified conditions inside the Luzira Maximum Prison. The situations of the brothers was touching. Depressing reports were now streaming in that 4 Ugandan suspects who had claimed responsibility on TV were now being tortured and coerced through intimidation to falsely implicate their Kenyan renditionees. Human rights bodies tried to get access to Alamein, but got the no entry sign.
And Uganda came up with counter-terrorism measures, and we saw the transportation of suspects from a neighboring country, and we also saw a detention of some suspects. Do you think there was a violation of human rights?
And I think the answer is yes, we are concerned. And let me give you the issue about the 13 Kenyan suspects who were extradited. In fact, it was done in a very clandestine manner. Extradition laws, which Ugandan and Kenyan laws didn't seem to be followed. And particularly the case of Kimadi, who is now in the prison here in Uganda. We actually requested to see him in the last 2 days and we were refused permission. So it all of these anti-terrorism measures need to be systematically reviewed. We need an independent inquiry of all the allegations which are being made in the aftermath of July. So, because otherwise we feel that many of these things are happening at quite an arbitrary.
As we condemn the killing of innocent civilians, we must rise up and stand strong in amplifying our calls for upholding of the rights of our brothers. We remind the Kenyan government that they are duty-bound to safeguard each citizen's basic right and not sell him or her for some few coins of silver.